Bitcoin is all the rage again. And we're going to look at Bitcoin as money, as ledger, and as code in a three-part series, starting off with Bitcoin as money. I'm Nick Falkinger, and this is Liberties Report.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Bitcoin as a concept remains kind of hard to wrap your head around because we're so conditioned to think of money in terms of the central bank issued money. Looking at my own thought process in 2011, when I was wrapping my head around this concept, I had problems with understanding the issuance of Bitcoin. If a central bank doesn't print the money, where does it come from? How do transactions work? Who picks up the transactions? Who issues and confirms the transactions? Understanding proof of work, understanding the blockchain is not easy. And then the real key to understanding how this would work, seeing I have a coding background, was understanding that the Byzantine generals problem had been solved and that you could not double spend money, which is a rather hard problem to wrap your head around. There was the decentralized ledger to understand. And finally, that the money was anonymous, not because it was tied to your identity, but because it was tied to very specific keys that were on the blockchain. These are all very hard concepts, each by their own. But it's when they come together that you really realized how Bitcoin is going to just wipe the floor with legacy banking. Now, the blockchain as such is not new. The concept of having entries that you're signing cryptographically, and where as you're adding new entries, you're also signing the previous entries so that you have a chain of verification, a chain of digital signatures with every change. That is not new. That exists, for instance, in digital medical records. You can find this in several places. What is the new thing? What is the real critical innovation here with the blockchain is the protection against double spending. That is the key, solving the Byzantine generals problem. So, in my experience, Bitcoin is kind of like the Matrix. You cannot tell somebody what Bitcoin is. You have to let people experience it for themselves. The first time I used a Bitcoin transaction, I sent the value of a cup of coffee to a friend in India on a Sunday. They had the money instantly. No fees were paid. No person or no administrative body could see this money being sent in transit, nor obviously seize it, since they couldn't see it in the first place. Only the receiver knew that the receiver had actually gotten this money, and they didn't know where it came from until I told them. This experience was like being transported 40 years into the future. And that's when you realize that the banks, the legacy banks, are stuck 40 years ago, IT-wise. That's part of why Bitcoin is going to hit. It's going to hit so hard. It's going to wipe the floor with the existing structures. But the key adoption is going to come from merchants, retail merchants. Because if you're looking at how the economy is structured right now, you have 4 levels. You have the government, you have banks, legacy banks, you have corporations, and you have people. Where corporations are an abstraction of a group of people. Banks are the one handling the money for these corporations, and governments seize as much money as they need from the banks to run their government. Now, what's happening between layers 2 and 3 here is that Bitcoin is a much more attractive value offering for handling money than the legacy banks. Corporations will cease to use the bank services. As they cease to use the bank services, governments can no longer go in and grab money. And the reason corporations will cease to use bank services is plain money. Credit card transactions cost between 2 and 5% off of every single transaction, straight off the top. Now, if you go to any entrepreneur who typically has a profit margin of about 5% and ask them if they want to double their profit margin by removing these taken from the top, these fees taken from the top, they will ask you where they sign up. So initially, it's going to be a competitive advantage for those who use Bitcoin instead of credit cards. Soon enough, though, the market will adjust to a new basic price level, and credit card will be outcompeted. The entire credit card system will be outcompeted. Therefore, Bitcoin is not going to gain adoption primarily from some kind of libertarian ideal, which was the initial push. It'll win on purely commercial grounds. However, now, as you try to convince people of going into Bitcoin, there are a number of misunderstandings that you just keep running into. As in the idea that once you have Bitcoin, you need to sell the Bitcoin to buy things. That was the case in 2011. I even have a slide saying that this is what you can buy for Bitcoin. US dollars, exchanging back, weed on the infamous Silk Road, and, for some reason, alpaca socks. Those were the three things you could buy with Bitcoin. Things have changed since then. Today, you can buy anything from castles to pencils using Bitcoin. And this is kind of hard for many to understand, that even though you can't buy it at your favorite store or your previously favorite store, if you're picking out an item, you're very, very likely to be able to pay a purchase of that item with Bitcoin today. There's the issue of explaining storage. How do you even store a Bitcoin? And there's this analogy which kind of breaks down, because this is not like a physical coin. Your knowledge of the key is your claim to the money. Therefore, a wallet is not really a good analogy, because a wallet contains a physical token. But knowledge can be shared infinitely. So if your key leaks, if your key is lost, you lose the money. A euro bill or dollar bill cannot be copied, or at least not legally. A key, however, can be copied. So it is quite a new concept. While a wallet might be good for initial introductions, it's not really good for understanding how Bitcoin works at depth. So these analogies keep breaking down from physical coins and bills, which obviously just keeps adding to the confusion. However, once somebody is on board, Bitcoin has implications way, way beyond just being money. And one of my favorite quotes here is that when you're looking at how the exchange rate of Bitcoin, how many US dollars can you exchange for one Bitcoin? That might turn out not to be very relevant in the semi-near future, comparing to the internet, when the internet arrived. While Bitcoin does displace the euro and the US dollar, you would not, 20 years out, you'll probably not consider its value in its replacing of the US dollar or the euro. Just like today, you're not valuing the internet based on its ability to replace the fax machine. There's a story here. There's a story of London, specifically. When London was electrified, the machines that were electrified were drop-in replacements for steam power. It took 60 years from the point where half of the machines were replaced, half of the factories were electrified, until somebody realized you no longer need to build factories in the city center by the water. You can build them outside the cities. You can build them flat, because building them like a cube had been an optimization for steam power. And therefore, you suddenly cut costs to a third. It took 60 years to get rid of that preconception, which came from steam power. So, in the next 2 episodes, we're going to go beyond Bitcoin as money and look at Bitcoin as a ledger and Bitcoin as code. I'm Rick Falfinger, and this is Liberties Report. Visit our sponsor, Private Internet Access. Good night.
This report is presented by Private Internet Access.
Liberties Report is produced using exclusively free software.